If you look at the recent polls nationally about the public's trust of government, slightly less than 50% trust the federal government to handle national affairs. Slightly more, 50-60% trust the state government to handle state affairs. But when you look at polls, more people trust their local governments. About 65-70% trust their city councils, their counties and school districts to take care of local affairs. So yay, we're more trustworthy than the state or federal government, but those numbers are still very low. If you're going to run for city council, I urge you, I challenge you to do what you can to improve the public's trust. Conduct yourself with integrity so that while citizens may not always like your decisions, they trust that you're making it for the right reason. Together, each of us can bolster citizens' belief in their local governments and strengthen democracy at the local level.
The different types of cities in Texas are important to know as a council member, especially before your elections, because they all have different rules and different regulations that you must abide by. The 4 different types of cities, there's your 3 general law cities, which is General Law A, General Law B, and General Law C. And then you have home rule cities, which allow you just a little bit more power, but each are important for knowing the rules and regulations before your elections. The main difference between the general law and home rule municipalities is the population that is within the city, as well as where they derive their authority from. With a general law city, you are only given the authority and power that's provided by the state, such as your statutes and codes, the Texas Constitution. Those are the rules that govern, and you can only have authority that's given or granted by those rules and statutes. Whereas with the home rule municipality, you look to the legislator not for powers or grants of power, but rather for limitations of power.
So it's important to understand the differences between the mayor-council form of government in cities and the city manager-council. A lot of the larger cities in Texas have chosen the city council/city manager form of government. It's kind of like having a corporation. You have a board of directors, which is like a city council, and then you have a CEO. The CEO runs the day-to-day operations. In a city, your CEO, if you've chosen that form of government, is your city manager. Your smaller cities may be the ones that choose the mayor-council form of government. In that case, your mayor will do the CEO job for the city. When you have a city manager as the CEO of your city, the city council does not have the authority to micromanage the city manager. It will be very important for that council, when hiring a city manager, to choose the right person and have trust in that person to run the day-to-day.
The budget document is a culmination of a whole lot of decisions, and it can get pretty complicated. Your chief executive, whether that's the mayor or a city manager, will present the budget picture in terms of services. If one of your campaign promises is to improve public safety, you go into the budget and you look for ways to enhance the community's ability to provide public safety services. The budget, it's a zero-sum game. In any community, resources are always limited. A lot of that budget development process is negotiation and bargaining, and there's never enough resources to go around to fill everybody's promises. That budget process is a great avenue for collaboration about just what is it we are able to afford and what promises are we going to keep here. It is really important to keep in mind that it's actually the citizen's job to be skeptical. It is the citizen's job to ask the hard questions. This is what they get to do. This is how this system was set up by our founding fathers. We don't have kings in this country. What we have are citizens. We govern at the consent of the citizenry. They don't have to agree. They don't always have to be polite. They get to ask questions. I think it's okay for citizens to be disruptive. It's not okay for there to be a loss of decorum. That mayor's role during council meetings, that responsibility to run a meeting with a certain decorum is not always easy, and it's really important. And there's a lot of great examples of mayors who have performed that responsibility really well. It is a constant job to engender trust with the citizens. Never hide from the truth. Even when the news is really, really bad, there will be people whispering in your ear to spin the news to something positive. Avoid that temptation, because in the public service, it never works out in the end. It always backfires. It is always best to own it. The people will forgive you. That is absolutely how you build trust.
Well, hopefully if you're running for city council, you believe in good governance. And what's vital to governing well at the local level is having our citizens trust us. And winning the public's trust starts during your campaign. So if you run a campaign that's transparent and you demonstrate integrity, you can build up that trust and carry that momentum into being an elected official. Once you're elected to the city council, you'll have a city attorney advising the council on what you can do legally, what you cannot do, and what you're mandated to do. But what I hope you do as an elected official is not just settle for legal mandates. Just because your city attorney tells you you can do it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And so I hope you'll strive to actually govern with integrity and honesty and transparency and be an ethical public official, which means going beyond just the legal limits. Once you're elected, you're going to be subject to federal, state, and local regulations that are going to affect your conduct. If your city is building infrastructure using federal grants, there's going to be federal anti-corruption rules that apply to your conduct, such as bribery. And then here in Texas, we have many ethical rules that apply by law. And then beyond that, many cities have their own local rules. So if you're running for public office, it's wise to know those ethics rules before you get into it, so you understand if it's going to affect you, your family, your business, and how you conduct your affairs.
Immunity, be it sovereign immunity, legislative immunity, or qualified, is the privilege not to have to face a lawsuit and damages because of acts that are taken in one's official capacity. If they're sued in their official capacity, it's just like suing the governmental entity. If someone's acting in an ultra vires fashion, like they were acting without any sort of authority to do what they're doing, not staying in their lane, they can definitely lose their immunity. Before taking an action that's going to significantly affect someone else's rights, an elected official should try to pay attention to their city manager's instructions and their city attorney, who should give them advice of the potentials of these decisions. Don't rush into any decisions without considering exactly how your actions might affect some individuals' rights.
The Texas Public Information Act is a statute that regulates local governments, or all government in the state of Texas, and it creates a presumption of openness in all official business. So any official business that takes place, there's a presumption that should be available to the public. So the Public Information Act regulates that, and it explains to the public how to get that information. The number one thing that candidates and elected officials need to know about the Public Information Act would be the presumption of openness, especially if you're coming from a private entity background where there is a lot of confidential private conversations that are not going to go out to the public. That really doesn't exist when you are an elected official. Pretty much everything, your entire business is to run the city, and all that business is subject to public disclosure. A lot of times we think, oh, we're taking my personal notes about this meeting, or I'm having a quote-unquote private conversation about a potential contract. Anything that is related to the transaction of official business is going to be available to the public. And so just everything you create or everything that comes across your desk, kind of keeping that in mind. This could be in the newspaper or these days, Facebook. This could go out there.
So the Texas Open Meetings Act is a state law really focused on the public's ability to engage in conversations and discussions with their public officials, and also to hold their public officials accountable to the decision-making process happening in an open setting where it can be observed in a transparent fashion. And so anytime that city officials are gathered to discuss public business, that usually is going to have to take place in an open, properly posted meeting. What that means is that we have an agenda that goes out beforehand, a list of topics you're going to discuss, give the public an opportunity to weigh in and provide input, and then any discussions, especially if they're going to occur amongst a majority or a quorum of that governing body, need to occur during that properly posted meeting. There are few exceptions that allow for closed executive session discussion of topics, but those are limited circumstances under the law. The part of open meetings that's often tricky is communications outside of those formal contexts in the formal meetings. And so that's where we start to really focus in on, is there a series of communications? Are we having emails or text chains on the side between council members? Are we meeting up maybe in a less formal setting where we got to count up and say, do we have a quorum here? Do we have a majority of council members present? When those things happen is when council members need to be aware that they need to hold off on that discussion and make sure it takes place in a properly posted public meeting.
Cities are political subdivisions of the state, so we look to their authority from the Texas Constitution as well as state laws and administrative rules. So there are two types of cities in Texas: general law and home rule. General law cities basically have the powers that the state has given them. If a statute says that the city can do something, it can. If the state has not said that this general law city has authority to act, they probably don't. Home rule cities, on the other hand, have the powers that are given to them in their city charter that their voters elected, and they're basically authorized to do such actions unless they are prohibited by other law. The most important thing for candidates for office to understand is that you need to determine what authority you have before you can take certain actions. Many people running for office assume that their community is not doing certain things and should change their practices, and sometimes they can, but you first have to check and be sure they're authorized to do that.
So when you're dealing with your zoning regulations, a lot of times they separate your uses into residential, commercial, industrial, and agricultural. It can regulate the lot sizes, the building heights, the building sizes. One of the concerns that a city councilman may have is, when I'm making my decision, what are any kind of constraints that I may have under state or federal law in my decision making? And it depends on the type of decision that you're making. For example, if it's a zoning decision, it is discretionary, but you can't make a decision that's arbitrary or capricious or discriminatory. That would violate state and federal laws. It has to be done in conformance with the comprehensive plan. If you're zoning an area and the area is residential, you wouldn't want to approve an application to make it a heavy industrial use within that residential area. That would violate probably your comprehensive plan. When they're running for office, they should get a copy of the city's comprehensive plan. In the comprehensive plan, you usually have your capital improvement plan. So these are a major infrastructure that the city would put in their budget. The candidate and then the elected official will know what land uses the city has in their comprehensive plan, and then what their needs are, what their infrastructure needs are.
When you become a candidate, and certainly when you get elected, there are different expectations of you. There are different standards that are going to apply. These days, once you're a public official, you're always a public official. You can't just take off your city council member cap nights, weekends, or when you travel to Las Vegas. People are going to expect that higher level of conduct all the time. There's going to be a higher level of scrutiny. Sometimes I have clients say, Alan, I just want to be treated like everybody else. You're not everybody else once you're elected. And you may have some tough choices between what you think is right for you, your business, your family, versus the community at large. Because once you're elected, ethics are going to mandate you care more about your city and your community than your own personal financial gain. Fortunately, there's lots of information freely available about ethics online. The Office of the Attorney General's Office, the Texas Municipal League, they all publish information about the ethics codes and statutes that apply. If you are running for city council in a particular city, inquire with the city secretary, the municipal clerk, if perhaps their city attorney has published any rules, or if the city has any local rules you're going to have to abide by. Get those rules, read through them, and understand them before you actually take the oath of office.
So many people who are thinking about running for city council or mayor are not aware of the time commitment that's involved. So there's a whole lot more to it than one meeting a month. There's regular meetings that these people are aware of, but there's also special meetings and workshops. And before every council meeting, you're going to get a council agenda packet with background information on all of the agenda items that are on the upcoming agenda. And that packet can be anywhere from 250 pages to 2,000 pages, just depending upon what is on the agenda for that meeting. Most cities, the council members serve on other committees, and those committee meetings usually happen during the daytime. If they're not self-employed or retired, they need to make sure that their boss is cognizant of the time commitment. Serving on city council can impact your personal life, especially your family life. You know, you're going to be gone on the evenings that you have council meetings. You might go out of town for training. There's a lot of weekend commitments a lot of times. There's banquets and fundraisers. Your partner needs to understand the time commitment and possibly their level of involvement. If you're going to go represent the city at a banquet or a fundraiser, perhaps you're expected to bring your partner or your spouse with you. Most cities don't pay a salary to council members, or most cities, if they do, it's very minimal. For example, College Station doesn't pay anything to their council members. Bryan pays $10 a month, and it is subject to withholding, so they actually get $7.89 a month. I have had people come in that wanted to run because they thought that being the mayor or a council member was a well-paying job, and it's not. Some cities have more strict guidelines than just state law on conflict of interest. Under state law, you may just have to abstain, but in Bryan, you can't have an interest at all. We had a guy that owned a glass company, and he used to get all the city work when windshields got broken or, glass in a building or something. Couldn't do that while he was on the council. Zero. We had another council member that was a caterer, and he couldn't cater for the city anymore. And when you think about all the catering jobs that he could not do for the city, that's a lot of money. You need to know going in, I won't be able to cater for the city. I won't be able to fix glass for the city if I'm on the council. People that do this have a servant's heart. They truly want to serve and help improve the quality of life in their communities, and that's admirable. But they need to understand, but going in, the huge time commitment that's involved. And I think as long as they know that, and they have the family support, the employer support, and they can work it in the way they need to into their life, they're going to be fine.